Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Jabez Experience. My name is Helen V. Hicks. I'm a licensed professional counselor, a parent coach, author, obviously a podcaster, and a mother of five. And this is my co-host.
My name is Curtis Brooks. I am a men's life coach. I specialize in transformational leadership for men.
Awesome. So this is officially our seventh episode. And so we kind of wanted to do a recap tonight just to kind of breeze through some of our past subjects and content that came up
Hmm.
for us. So in our very first episode, we talked about introspection and how important it is for people in general. And I know, Curtis, you really emphasize for men.
Right.
And I guess I just want to add into that, highlighting it for men, because I think the history of human beings, women have always been labeled as emotional. And so women have definitely been encouraged and given the space and the ability to get in touch with their emotions. Whereas historically, men have always been kind of shut down and thinking like it's more manly and is more masculine for men not to be in touch with those emotions. So I thought it was absolutely wonderful that you're coming in and you're saying, hey, men, this isn't just something for women to do. Like,
Absolutely.
men need this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think for my own life personally, I had to come to that conclusion because as men, that's just what we've shown. We're shown, we see other men who don't talk about their feelings and just kind of, and not necessarily that every time you meet a man, he needs to be like, hey, I feel this way, I feel that way. But just having those opportunities where you connect with men who can give you the the richer parts of life, if you will, and that for us as men, it's more than just saying I'm bringing home a paycheck. There's other parts of who we are, and that other part, I think one of the main parts is just really connecting with who we are and doing that introspection is absolutely important. And so for me, I had to find that out on my own, unfortunately, because I didn't know anyone that was doing it, and I didn't. I didn't grow up with anyone. I didn't find any other men who talked about it. And I just had to come to a place where to say, hey, you know what? I'm comfortable talking about this. I'm comfortable putting this out in the open. And it didn't not make me feel any less than a man or unmanly or anything like that. And matter of fact, it made me feel more of a man. And I don't mean that man who's pounding on his chest, but just bringing the humanity back in my own manhood. And so it was important for me to do that, and or at least get to that place. And I think that as far as my own personal and professional goals, it was huge because once I began to do that, I found other men who were just like, hey, what is that thing that you were just talking about? You know, that sounds interesting. So I was able to spark a lot of different conversations with men who were interested in doing that introspection and just letting them know what it was in fact about. So
Right. So I like the part that you said about just being more human.
yeah,
And I think that is absolutely missing for a lot of men because
absolutely.
experiencing emotions is human. It's, something that anyone under, that human category is going to experience and you should experience. And when you're cutting yourself off from that emotional experience, you're cutting yourself off from a piece of your
Mm,
humanity. And I thought that was very impactful and powerful that you just kind of put it that way, that,
right.
your humanity. And I think that is like the underlining
Mm.
most important piece.
Yeah, that's huge to me, Helen, because I think for me, I had to come to my own realization. Again, no one helped me with this. This is just me and the Lord, basically. And I had to come to my own realization that, hey, I matter. You know, and it was important for me to show up. And the only way I had to show up was to get in contact with those feelings because, or those emotions that come with life, that come with being rejected, that come with being, watching things work out and becoming a failure at it and having to get back up and do it again and just life taking place in the midst of just wherever I may have been trying to get to. Life was happening. And so for me, I had to make that connection and say, regardless of how things turn out or don't turn out, I had to show up for this thing. And I think part of that introspection, as we've been talking about, is that when we as men don't get in contact with or get in touch with those feelings, those emotions that come with doing the introspection, we can find ourselves almost feeling like we're invisible. And for me, it was important for me to show up and to say, hey, you know what? My life does matter. And I think there's a lot more to that introspection that when we as men, when we're not doing it, it can absolutely send us in a tailspin because we can show up as that raging machine when we have not gotten in touch with those emotions that come with, as we talked about in one of the previous episodes, words, and we don't connect the words with the feelings. We can find ourselves again being that raging machine that is just uh, out of control.
Right, right. So that definitely kind of brings something
Yeah.
into my head for a minute in terms of, I always like to explain to people that your emotions serve the same purpose as your five senses. You know,
Mm,
you see, hear, taste, touch, smell.
right.
Um, so those five senses are there to give you feedback about your environment. They're there
Absolutely.
to tell you, you know,
Mm.
oh, you see this car coming, perhaps you shouldn't step out into the street.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
Absolutely.
it gives you information, and your emotions do the exact same job, but they're just giving you feedback about the pieces of our life experience that you can't readily see.
Right.
So you have an interaction with someone and you experience an emotion. Like outside, you
Right.
might not be able to point to exactly the something that somebody did that
Yeah.
everybody would agree is, oh, that person's bad because they did that. You like, it may just be an experience in that moment that's like, you
Right.
know? And so all your emotions really want to do is to say, hey, like something about this I'm not okay with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Helen. Yeah, it's interesting with our emotions because I think the more, especially with us as men, the more that we don't know about our emotions, we don't know about ourselves. And so when the emotions come up, we can completely misinterpret actions by other people, and we can unfortunately file them. And I like to, when I'm working with my clients, we can unfortunately file those things in the wrong place, and it can, and because they're filed in the wrong place in our mind here, in our mental uh, Rolodex, if you will, because those things are filed in the wrong place, we cannot make the right connection and extract the right experience from life. And we can find ourselves not wanting to touch a certain thing because that thing is filed incorrectly. And that's the reason why it is important for us to as men to do the introspection. But if you are, again, as a man, if you file those things incorrectly, it is important to have a coach. You know, Helen and myself, we're here, and to have these conversations and to start talking about certain things, because that's way we know that you, as a man or woman, have filed those things in the wrong place. And if you file them in the wrong place, you may be reading something that the persons may not be saying. You may be feeling something that really is just out of alignment with the natural tendencies that we all have. And as Helen stated so nicely, those emotions are there to just warn us as red flags. And if we don't know those red flags, we just drive through the stop sign, unfortunately.
Right, right. So I like how you said connection to self.
Yeah.
Because it absolutely is that. And I want to throw in there, like, your emotional experience is always a reflection of you.
Hmm.
Like, that is your experience of whatever outside thing that has happened, that is telling you about you. So if you're cutting yourself off from your emotions, you're cutting yourself off to your true life experience. And like you said, that
Mm,
connection to self, like, this is me, this is what I like, this is what I don't like, this is
right.
what is comfortable for me. Like, all these things, it sounds kind of simple as I'm saying them right now, but you imagine how deep this goes. And
Absolutely.
you being in touch and connected with your own emotional experience. And like you said, not filing it in the category of someone else, being able to own that's your emotional experience. Why? Why
Yeah.
is that your experience of this? Why is that your interpretation of this? Because so many things can be interpreted in many different ways. There are
Yes.
very few
Yes.
things that are just
Mm,
black and white and that's it, and there's no other way to see it. But
mm,
so many things are shades of gray. And it's like
mm,
you have to kind of be open to seeing the different perceptions of it, seeing the different possibilities,
mm.
and always owning your interpretation of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's pretty powerful, Helen, because I like what you said, owning our interpretation of our emotions, because if not, we can end up owning someone else's interpretation of said emotion. And you may have experiences with clients, Helen, in regards to just, there are a lot of times when people are afraid in life, and not wanting to experience certain things. And so there are times where I've worked with clients uh, uh, where the gentleman may not have experienced certain things, but he's heard things. He's seen his father go through certain things, or seen other men go through certain things, and yet he actually hasn't experienced it. And
Mm.
so his interpretation of emotions, of that experience, is through hearsay. And that, I think, unfortunately, that prevents us from stepping out in life and enjoying life, and really getting to know ourselves, as Helen said again, so nicely, getting to know ourselves through our emotions. And that is, I think, really that person that we end up being afraid of.
Right. Absolutely. Wow. This is like our recap, but I think we're like something totally different.
Yes, yes.
But I like that so much, in terms of, oh, darn it, now I threw myself off. Um, oh, what did you just say? Um,
I was just saying the interpretation of our emotions can be actually through what someone else has experienced.
yes, thank you, thank you, thank you, getting me back on track. Okay.
Mhm.
So one that reminds me of something I learned so many years ago, and it kind of contributes to what I do with the parenting work that I do. Um, People don't always seem to understand, because we talk a lot about people's predisposition for mental health issues, or other physical ailments and things of that nature, but people dismiss how much role modeling plays in our
Absolutely.
development.
Mm,
There is a certain amount of
mm,
behaviors that we engage in that is purely us copying what we've been exposed to. And it's not even, from our own experience. Like you said, here's somebody who didn't even experience this, but yet had their perception of, oh, but this is what you do and this is what you don't do. And
right.
it's not based on anything that person even experienced. So there is a certain number of things in our lives that we just repeat
Mm,
because it was what we were exposed
mm,
to. And this is a huge piece of our mental health as well.
yes.
Whether you're someone growing up in a household with, parents that have mental health issues, um, whether you're growing up in a household where just the emotional piece of life is stifled and it's not encouraged for you to be in touch with those emotions and to experience those emotions and to talk about those emotions. Like, there's so much about this in general that is learned behavior, and
Absolutely.
we don't always connect with the fact that it was learned.
Yeah, absolutely, Helen. Absolutely. Yeah, I was taking my baby girl out for a walk earlier, and You know how sometimes the sidewalk is sections off in squares. There's like a little line for each block, or when they're preparing or making a sidewalk. And this was the case as we're walking our apartment development. And my baby girl, when the gaps are a little bigger, she pauses right before it, and she has a difficult time stepping across the line. And then at times where she'll hold my hand, and I'll say, nope, 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 I'm not going to give you my hand. I wanted you to cross over because it's going to be okay. And then so instead, if I'm not going to give her my hand, she wants to go back the other way. She wants to turn around and go back the other way. And how much to life that shows up in who we are at times when we get to those sensitive areas in life, be it the lack of introspection or dealing with or handling our emotions. When we get to those sensitive areas in life where we, rather than trying to cross those lines, if you will, those delicate areas, hold the hand of a coach or something like that, we will turn back around, and we can find ourselves in a wilderness, so to speak, and perhaps kind of what Helen was just stating moments ago, we can find ourselves ideally in someone else's wilderness because we haven't experienced it ourselves, but this is what we've been told. So
Right, right, right. So I think you kind of set us up to transition into one of our other topics, which was anxiety.
yeah,
Because I can totally see that in the example that you gave in regards to your daughter, and she's walking, and the smaller cracks, those are okay, but the bigger
yeah,
ones,
yeah,
they sound scary to her, or they look scary to her. And so that is a reflection of anxiety. And
mm,
it just kind of reminds me of how anxiety can creep up in life for us and make
mm,
something that is so mundane as a crack in the
yes,
sidewalk seem like the end of the world, like you're
mm,
falling off the ledge, and oh my gosh, I'm going to do anything to avoid it rather
yes,
than just face it and find out that it's just a crack.
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, the anxiety piece is a powerful piece. Because I think it ends up being so telling about who we are, where we've come from, and be it abusive situations or be it hearsay. Anxiety piece can work the same way now. We have an anxiety about hearsay and what we've been told, what this experience is, uh, what should happen, what should come from this experience. And I think I even like to say at different conversations I've had with clients is that so much part of what we are what we're here to do or what's taken place for each of us is that we've all been born into something, fighting a battle that we didn't start. It could be our parents have gone through some things, and their parents have gone through some things, and now we're in a particular predicament or situation. And now again, unbeknownst to us, is coming out of the womb as a baby, and eventually in our teenage years, adult life, we're dealing with that predicament that we're placed in. And now we have to mentally and emotionally and physically come out from under that stuff. And so we could potentially be born into a place that has established anxiety, and we have to be prepared to fight our way out of it and say, this is not mine. I understand the situation, but and it can take us a time to understand the situation. This life is, it's something, man. It's something, because sometimes you're born, yes, Helen, yes. Sometimes you're born into some stuff you don't even know that you're born into it. And I think one of the previous conversations Helen and I were talking or shared that you can only do so much. I think this is what Helen said. You can only do so much by yourself. Sometimes we need that other person to pull some of those things out and say, hey, this is another limitation that you have, just the it's just life, man. And you need that other hand to wash. You need you need your right hand to wash the left hand to wash the right hand, and that's just the way it is, Helen. So what you got for us, love?
Right. So, I would just had an image in my hand, trying to wash your one hand with one hand,
Yes, yes.
you don't get too far. But no, you're talking about being born into it, and it kind of triggered a thought for me.
Mm,
And what I'm about to say really is kind of for expecting mothers. I should put
mm,
it that way. Because I think a lot of women may not be aware your fetus is already learning.
mm,
Once that fetus has developed ears and that fetus is in tune with your heart rate, that fetus
mm.
is in tune with, outside of the body noises. And
Yeah.
while all of those noises are muffled, for a fetus, and the fetus can't hear exactly what is going on, what happens is whatever outside noise is going on gets paired with your heart rate.
Mm. Wow.
And in utero, you begin to teach your child to be anxious.
Jeez.
And people aren't aware of this. And then they're wondering, okay, you have this baby and perfect by all medical standards,
Mm.
but you're wondering why this baby has the disposition that he or she has. And a lot of times it's because that infant learned how to be anxious in utero by simply listening to the mother's heart rate and
Right.
the
Right.
external noise.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, that's very powerful, Helen. That's very powerful. And as a man, I found this out with my first son, and uh, had to just really curb my own behavior. And I remember reading to my son, and naturally, and he came out the womb, and he just enjoys reading, and it's just very, very interesting because as a child myself, there was a lot of conflict between my mom and my father, my biological father, and I think I would later on learn that I had taken on a lot of those different things, and so I in fact had to unlearn some stuff. So what you're saying, Helen, is absolutely facts, and I think for a lot of us, we can't even fathom that because we think that not just the child being in the womb, but that once the child has been delivered, that oh, this is when the show starts. But the show starts, as Helen just said, the show starts well before that, and months before that, and so it does become imperative that if we are dealing with anxiety, um, that that we get some things together before we're deciding to bring another life into. And again, and I'm not trying to direct anyone's life, but it's just important, once we have taken hold of this information, now it becomes our responsibility to make sure that we're setting that environment, that setting the proper environment up in the right atmosphere for our child to be brought into this world.
Right. Absolutely. I was smiling for a minute there because I thought you might go in a totally different direction
I'm
with
trying to
that.
stay on track here.
I was about to say that's a different show. But no, you brought that back in very nicely.
Mhm.
But yeah, we could talk about anxiety. Um, all I can say to kind of like summarize that is anxiety almost always comes back to a connection with fear or control.
Mm,
There's something, people are afraid something's going to happen, afraid
mm,
something's not going to happen. Seeking out control of areas in life that they
mm,
don't directly have control over, wanting to overly control things. Um, so most anxiety tends to come back to fear and control. And that becomes an area in which I almost always redirect people to their sense of belief.
mm,
This is where belief becomes very powerful and useful and active in your own individual life, because there's a ton of stuff in life you can't control. I don't
Absolutely.
care who you are, what you have, you can't control it. And
Absolutely.
so you have to have some way of being okay with not being in control of those things and still having a sense of safety
Hmm.
and comfort and assurance. And that's what your belief system gives you. It gives you those things when you cannot actively create it for yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think, Helen, this is, I often talk about leadership with and working with men, and I think that that's the real leadership. When we can navigate our way out of the situations and know that just realize the feelings, accept that the feelings are there. As we kind of were talking about in the first part of our show here, recognizing that the feelings are there, accepting them for what they are, and doing that breathing work that we've talked about in a previous episode, and just uh, applying those applying those that process or the procedures that we've shared with you, and just being able to walk yourself through this, feel the feelings, know that they're there, and continue walking. And that is, to me, I believe that is what a important part of leadership is, because when we can know those feelings are there, walking through those feelings, we can absolutely lead other people through that as well. And this is really, I believe, the bulk of what so many of us are dealing with. So it's not just about leading an organization, it's about leading ourselves through the trauma, the turmoil that we've all been a part of on some level. We've been born into in situations, as Helen said not so nicely, even be in the womb. We've been subject to certain different things. And so leadership is really is recognizing those things, accepting that, your situation is what it is. There's a scripture in the Bible that says, when we are weak, he is strong. And so accepting where we're at and calling on the Most High to direct our path, and bring that truth to us, so that we can place the truth on the altar and say, "Hey, this is where I'm at." And similar to like the prayer of Jabez, that's exactly what he did. He recognized he was in a situation, born to his name actually meant sorrow, and he said, "Well, Lord, I'm going to give you this thing. This is my condition. This is my situation." And so that's what we have to be prepared to do in order for to God, in order to that God will show up and answer those prayers, and move us along accordingly.
Awesome. So I definitely like that. And you're really good at just setting us up for the next subject.
I don't even know what the next
Just intuitively, just
Mhm.
but yeah, another show that we did was in regards to leadership in the family, and men taking on that leadership role. And then I interjected that sometimes it's not always the man who's taking on the leadership role.
Yes.
You know, I totally agree there has to be a hierarchy
Mhm.
because everybody can't be in charge. But
Yeah.
you know definitely I love how you are describing leadership, and I'm equating it to being the role model.
Yeah.
It's not the person who's sitting behind everyone directing and saying, oh, you should do it this way, you should do it that way, go here, go there, do this, do that. It's the person who's out in front who's saying, okay, here's
Absolutely.
how you do it.
Mm.
I'm not going to sit here and punish you for having an emotional outburst and not own the fact that I just had my own.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well said. Well said. Yeah.
Right. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's also important to know that a leader at first has to be a servant. A leader
yeah,
first has to be a servant, and unfortunately, I think we have the title or the name leader so convoluted or tied up in to mean that a person is leading organization or manager or some sort. And I my thought is that if you can't lead yourself out of your situation and your personal affairs, You can't lead an organization, and ideally the individual leading an organization is typically textbook style. But you first have to be able to lead an organization. We first have to be able to lead ourselves out of our situations personally, and we can lead ourselves out of those situations personally. And again, being able to serve ourselves first, much like the scriptures talk about removing the speck out of your brother's eye, and yet you're sitting there with a plank in your own eye. So we can serve ourselves first, knowing that we're dealing with a bigger issue, because ideally our stuff is typically the bigger issue that needs to be solved. And if we can solve our stuff, the big situations, our brother's situation is, in fact, looks like can be, like a speck in his eye, or a smaller situation, and then we can deal with that matter.
Right, right. I really like what you said, that, being a leader means being a servant first. And I
Mhm.
can see wide application, to that statement in a
Sure.
lot of different situations and, circumstances of what's going to make you into a great leader,
Yes.
regardless of, who or what you're leading, is having that experience and that knowledge and humility of having
Absolutely.
served, you know,
Absolutely.
being able to speak to that position,
Mm.
um, because it is not always easy to serve.
Mhm.
and,
Absolutely.
and sometimes you have to swallow your own pride and whatever else that you have going on in
Mm.
order to truly serve, and not the kind of sorry, I just had this image in my head of someone who's, like, you're in a restaurant and they just come up and throw your plate on the table and it's
Yeah.
just like, whatever.
Mm. Absolutely.
It's not to serve like that, in terms of, I did the bare minimum of whatever is
Mm.
required of me, but to serve in a way, like I said, it's humble. It's to say, you know what, here, let me make this the best experience that I can for you in my
Mm.
capacity.
Yeah.
I think that's huge. And I think the people who understand that and know that and do that do so much better in leadership roles than those who have always been distanced from it.
Mm. Absolutely. Yeah, Helen. I mean, this leadership thing is huge because we obviously know that leadership is not just for men. We're all were created to be leaders, so we are definitely aware of that. But this leadership thing is so big because until a person can become a servant first, how can you if you can't get yourself out of your own situation, you can't begin to help your brother or your sister. As the flight attendants often say, if you've ever flown before, is that they invite you to encourage you to put your own mask on first. And how much of our stuff can be in the way, and trying to help someone else. We can be the stumbling block if we have not overcome our own situation, and further drive them into a situation, and or an organization, for all that matters. So it's important that we
Right.
realize the power of a leader being healed, and then again being that servant first, and then willing to help others.
Absolutely. And so you talked about your own stuff and it getting in the way, and that kind of reminded me, of one of our episodes. We did touch on parenting, a very small component of parenting. But when you said own stuff and taking care of your own stuff, that
Mhm.
just reminds me that there are so many parents who, they have children and they're doing whatever they can to parent those children, but their internal reality is they're trying to parent their inner child. And they're
That's good, Helen.
often
Mm.
they're often projecting their childhood issues onto their children in
Mm.
this day and age, and a lot of it's disconnecting, and it's causing a lot of tension. It's causing a lot of friction. It's causing a lot of dysfunction because from the child's perspective, the child's like, I'm not that.
Mm,
That's not where I'm going with this at all. But
yes.
here you have this parent who is trying to fix their own stuff
Mm,
without owning the fact that it's their stuff.
yes, yes, yes. Man, Helen, that's a drop the mic there, sister. That is a drop the mic for real, man. Wow, that's some deep stuff there. And man, just isn't it interesting how that so many things are essentially or can feel like they're hidden. They're not hidden, but they're there. And it really takes a person who is skilled, a person who's done their own work to realize that an individual or client or a person who might watch this podcast, that you in fact might be dealing with that. That is a drop the mic kind of thing right there, Helen. Seriously, I don't even know. Yeah, that's powerful, and I think it can be maybe even similar to that parent living vicariously through their child, perhaps. Uh,
Mhm.
and I think that as far as his parenting piece, man, that parenting piece is tough, Helen. I know when we did that episode, you had to carry me on that one, sister. You had to carry me on that one, Helen, because I didn't. I was just like, because I was a lot of those different things, and from that episode, I actually played that episode back several times and listened to what you said, and then that's no joke. I played that episode back several times and just listened because I needed to hear that myself, and from that episode, it's helped me out a lot, Helen. It really has
Good.
tremendously. It really has, and I'm not just telling you that. I don't just use my words lightly or just toss out stuff like that. But it was absolutely a powerful episode for me, and I just made me think about how something not only just as a parent, but even a way of leadership, that we're having to lead in pain sometimes. We're having to be parents in pain sometimes, and disappointments, and having to separate those things, and for that we don't allow those things to interfere with being a productive parent, not necessarily a parent that's being liked all the time, but a good parent, doing the right things in the at the right moments, at the right times, and just putting those parenting practices that Helen so nicely shared with us, putting those things into practice. And
Right.
we're again just often leading in pain. Our own stuff, as Helen said moments ago, that we're trying to unfortunately uh, heal in the midst of leading our own children, or in the midst of the pain that we're dealing with, and trying to push that pain down and still try to be a good parent, and yet the pain stuff comes up, and I know it's a lot there, but it is a lot, and it's something that we're all going through, though.
Right. Absolutely. We all have our stuff, regardless of whatever your childhood experience was, your young adult experience
Yeah.
was. Nobody comes through life unscathed.
Mm-hmm.
We all have our
Absolutely.
things that we've experienced, we have to work on, we have to develop, like whatever it may be. And because we all have our own stuff to work on, I know for me professionally that is a huge piece of what keeps me humble and keeps me out of that judgment seat of looking
Yeah.
on anyone and saying, oh well, you have to do this and you need to do that. Like, there's stuff I need to do.
Mm.
Like I love the topic of parenting. I love being a parent and the knowledge that I have, the skills that I have. That's an area that is a huge strength for me. And
Mm.
I don't look down on anyone else because that's not their area of strength, because
Right.
I fully recognize I have weaknesses and they may be strong in my weakness.
Yes.
so
Yes. Yes. Yes.
so I'm going into that area because I want to make it okay for people to acknowledge that this isn't your area. This
Mm,
isn't your strength. This is a place that you struggle with, because it's only by acknowledging, the things that we need to work on, are we truly able to start working on them. So
mm,
as long as, whatever the situation may be, whatever the area of weakness may be, it doesn't matter. But as long as you're constantly running from it, you're
mm.
trying to hide it, you're trying to push it away and ignore it, it's never getting better. And not only is it not getting better, it's festering and it's developing into other things internally with you. And then it's coming out in how you speak and interact with other people. And so
Absolutely.
now you're going back to, whatever episode it was, you're talking about planting those seeds.
Yeah.
And here's somebody who's going out and planting and sowing these seeds that are only going to produce weeds and things that are
Absolutely.
going to choke out the life of
Yeah.
other things.
Mm,
So, I'm never about shaming people. I'm never about guilt tripping people. And as a matter of fact, I tell people all the time, shame and guilt are useless feelings. Let's just throw them out.
mhm.
You learn from it and you grow and you move on. That's all I want to focus on. So if this is helping anyone who is listening, then I don't want you to allow the shame and the guilt to suffocate you.
Right,
I,
right, right.
I, want you to be able to pull it off and say, you know what? Yes, I did make those mistakes. I did do this. I did do that. But now I'm in a place of self forgiveness, and now I'm in a place of growth.
Mm.
And that's where all of us should strive to be.
Absolutely, Helen. Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it's important that we understand this piece, especially you mentioned briefly about the seeds being sown, because anger, we don't miss we may not necessarily look at anger as a seed or a person sowing a seed, but our actions, our behavior, our thoughts, if you will, they are in fact those seeds that are planted. And I can definitely say, as a witness, that when you don't have the right information, you can find yourself serving anger. You can find yourself serving that very thing, again, whether you understand it or you don't. You can find yourself serving that very thing that you don't understand, just out of sheer ignorance. No, no disrespect to any of you who will listen, but because you are unaware of something does not mean that you are not serving it. And so you can in fact be serving anger. You can be serving jealousy, and that anger can be as a god that sits on the throne. That jealousy could be as God sitting on the throne. It could be as a God, not the God, but a God, something that you end up serving, especially with us as men. And one of the things especially with parenting, was the anger. I served it pretty, pretty tough, and I had to give it up. I had to give it up, and I had to make some, just I'm being very candid here, but I had to make some tough decisions, because the more you serve that anger or whatever it might be, it doesn't have to be anger. It could be jealousy. It could be hatred. It could be anything. The list of different things go on and on. But the more you serve that thing, the more you have to feed it. The more you make a sacrifice, because basically when our emotions are out of control, we end up making a sacrifice to that anger, sacrifice to jealousy, sacrifice to whatever it might be. And the more we make those sacrifices, the bigger we have to indulge, the greater we have to feed it. Now we have to, and the actions and the behavior become bigger and bigger. And so at some point as men, we have to be able to say, that's not the direction I want to go. I don't want to be in a place where my children are afraid of me. And that's what I had to make that decision. So
Right.
yeah.
So you said some good things. And I know we're coming to the end of
No,
our
no,
time.
this is good.
So
This is good. This is good.
So the one thing I kind of wanted to comment on was in regards to anger, and in, I guess, my learning that anger often stems from a sense of being owed something, whether you
Yeah.
feel like you're
Mm,
owed a sense of respect, however you may define respect, you're owed a sense of obedience, like
mhm.
whatever that dynamic is, if you truly ask yourself, the right questions, you'll get down to that feeling of, okay, you're angry at the person who cut you off because you
Yeah.
feel like they owed you the courtesy to wait instead of cutting
Absolutely.
you off. you know
Mhm.
so if you really kind of explore it, oftentimes anger is tied to a feeling that you're owed something and somebody failed to give you what you believe you are
Mhm.
owed. Um, and in order to kind of dismantle that, you have to be able to face, nobody owes you anything. Like,
Mhm. Absolutely.
and I know a lot of parents, I mean, because we're kind of transitioning between topics here, but I know there are a lot of parents who parent with that
Yeah.
expectation that, my child or my children owe me whatever. You owe it to me to give me money, you owe it to me to bring
Right.
me food, you owe it to me to do what I tell you to do, like whatever it is. And that's not a healthy dynamic to parent in. That's not a healthy dynamic to have any type of relationship in.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
um because then it comes back to a sense of, how much does someone have to do in
Yes.
order to be relinquished from owing you?
Absolutely.
And a lot of times when I present that question to people, they're like, oh my gosh,
Hmm.
I never thought of it that way. I never thought of, like, well, there has to be a point in
Right.
wherever this debt has been paid. Like,
Mm.
no, somebody no longer owes you. They get out of this dynamic. And when I present it to people that way and they start thinking of it that way, now it becomes easier for them to back off of this,
Absolutely.
because if that's what they project onto other people, then it
Mhm.
becomes something that they also have to apply to themselves. Like, well,
Absolutely.
if your children owe you, then doesn't that mean now you owe your parents or you
Mhm.
owe other people in your life? And it becomes a very entangled, dynamic, and it becomes easier for people to say, "Oh wow, that's not really where I wanted to go with this, and that's not
Right.
really how I want to be and how I want to present." So, but that's what kind of triggered in my head. You're talking about anger,
Mhm.
and that sort of thing. But I know we're coming to the end of our time.
Yeah, this has been good, Helen. This has been great.
It
Absolutely.
has. It really, really has. And I like the fact that we decided to do kind of like a recap. And I know we jumped around to a lot of different topics, but I think everything that we said, has been useful and helpful and
Yes.
informative and, directive. And I hope whoever is listening, that you're pulling nuggets out of this, you're pulling things that you can apply to your life and to help guide you and direct you to living the blessed life that I know all of you deserve.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I will just say that if you are man or woman, if you are ready to do the work, as the old saying goes, if you are ready, the teacher's ready. The student, when a student is ready, the teacher will appear. And such is life. And this has been definitely teachable moments and opportunities for me as well. And and that's just that's just life. And we don't ever stop learning. And so there's always opportunities to learn. And so if you are man or a woman and you are ready to commit to the process of coming out of where you're at, of that wilderness, or going in circles, or perhaps living your life vicariously through your child or through an experience that you have not yet experienced yourself, get in contact with myself or Helen, and we can help you walk through this, put some tough questions before you, because oftentimes we need the tough questions. And the more and more we go through life, we can see that times are changing and not necessarily the principles are changing. but yet we can find ourselves having to deliver this message in yet a different way in order to pull those individuals out of what they're dealing with. So, yeah, it's been awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a wonderful recap. I just want to say, if you want to reach out to Curtis, I believe your website is It's Not Rocket Science.
Yeah, it's not rocket science coaching.com. And again,
Okay.
men's life coach and the transformational leadership specialist.
Awesome. So, again, I'm a licensed professional counselor and a parent coach. You can reach me at my website, helenvhickscounseling.com. Um, and I look forward to hearing from you, or at least having you tune in once again.
Absolutely.
Okay. Good night.
All right. Ciao, everybody. Bye bye.